The first bones noticed inside this tyrannosaur were tiny toes poking through its rib cage. They did not belong to the predator. They belonged to something it had eaten. And this was not an adult Gorgosaurus crushing the bones of a giant herbivore. It was a 5 to 7-year-old juvenile with the folded legs of two small dinosaurs still preserved in its abdomen. That makes this fossil the first tyrannosaur skeleton known with stomach contents preserved in place. More importantly, it gives us a direct answer to a much larger question. Were young tyrannosaurs simply smaller versions of the enormous bone crushers they would become? Or did they live as a completely different kind of predator? The animal is Gorgosaurus libratus, a close relative of Tyrannosaurus rex that lived about 75.3 million years ago in what is now Alberta, Canada. Its skeleton was discovered in 2009 in the Dinosaur Park Formation, one of the richest late Cretaceous dinosaur deposits on Earth. This individual was nowhere near fully grown. Its femur suggests a body mass of roughly 335 kilograms. That is heavy enough to be dangerous, but less than 13% of the estimated mass of a large adult Gorgosaurus. Thin sections cut from its bones revealed growth marks, showing that it died between 5 and 7 years old. The cause of death is unknown. What happened after death is clearer. The carcass was buried with much of the skeleton still connected, preserving a nearly complete skull, parts of the limbs, the pelvis, ribs, and delicate belly ribs called gastralia. That unusual completeness would become essential because it allowed researchers to determine exactly where the smaller bones were sitting. When the fossil was first collected, nobody knew that it contained prey. The surprise appeared during preparation, as rock was carefully removed from around the skeleton. Small toe bones emerged near the rib cage, far from the Gorgosaurus feet. Continued work revealed that these toes were attached to tightly folded legs, belonging to two other dinosaurs. Finding small bones beside a carnivore does not automatically make them a meal. Bones can be washed together, trampled into the same layer, or scattered into a carcass after the animal dies. Researchers therefore had to test whether these remains really came from inside the digestive system. Several clues point to the same conclusion. The prey bones occupy a compact area in the rear portion of the Gorgosaurus abdominal cavity, beneath the rib cage and between its belly ribs. Many of the little leg bones remain articulated, meaning they are still connected in their natural order. The limbs are also sharply folded and compressed, as if they had been packed inside a muscular stomach. Then there is the surface of the bone. Under magnification, the prey remains look tarnished, pitted, and etched compared with the smoother bones of the Gorgosaurus. That damage is consistent with exposure to acidic digestive fluids. These were not random animals buried underneath the predator. They were inside it and being digested when it died. The prey were identified as Citipes elegans. Citipes was a caenagnathed, part of a group of lightly built, beaked theropod dinosaurs related to oviraptorosaurs. It was not a bird, although its body would have looked far more bird-like than the bulky image usually associated with dinosaurs. Adult Citipes were small compared with Gorgosaurus, and the two individuals in this stomach were smaller still. Their bone tissue was rapidly growing and lacked the annual growth marks seen in older animals. Both were less than a year old. Each is estimated to have weighed only around 9 to 12 kilograms, roughly in the range of a large turkey. Inside the stomach of a 335-kilogram tyrannosaur, they were very manageable prey. But the most revealing detail is what the Gorgosaurus swallowed. It did not gulp down either Citipes whole. The stomach contains mostly hind limb material. There are thighs, lower legs, feet, a few tail vertebrae, and several other small elements, but not two complete skeletons. The young predator appears to have dismembered the animals and selected their muscular hindquarters. In simple terms, it chose the meatiest sections. A narrow throat may also have limited the size of the pieces it could swallow. Whatever the exact reason, the fossil records a feeding style very different from the familiar image of an adult tyrannosaur driving thick teeth through a large carcass. These were also two separate meals. One set of Citipes bones lies deeper in the stomach region and shows heavier acid etching. The second set is positioned differently and is less altered. The simplest interpretation is that one animal was eaten first and spent longer being digested before the second was consumed. We cannot turn that evidence into a precise clock. The fossil does not tell us exactly how many hours or days separated the meals, nor can it prove that the Gorgosaurus personally killed both animals. It could have hunted them, scavenged them, or done some combination of the two. Still, two very young individuals of the same species, processed in a similar way and eaten during separate feeding events, are unlikely to be meaningless. They suggest that small, young kynognathids were suitable food for a juvenile Gorgosaurus, and may have been deliberately targeted when available. That fits the young tyrannosaur's anatomy. Juvenile Gorgosaurus had a relatively narrow, lightly built skull. Their teeth were thinner and more blade-like than those of adults. Their bodies were slender, and their legs were proportionally long. They were not harmless babies. This individual was already several meters long, but it was built more like a quick, middle-sized predator than a walking bone crusher. As Gorgosaurus grew, the equipment changed. The skull became deeper and broader. The lower jaw strengthened. The teeth became thicker, and estimated bite forces rose dramatically. The adult animal, reaching several tons in mass, could feed on the large hadrosaurs and horned dinosaurs sharing its environment. Its reinforced jaws could survive loads that would have threatened the lighter skull of a juvenile. This transformation was probably gradual rather than a sudden switch on one birthday. Studies of Gorgosaurus jaws and teeth suggest that the transition toward much larger prey accelerated as individuals approached roughly 600 kilograms, around the beginning of the rapid adolescent growth phase. The stomach-bearing Gorgosaurus was only about half that mass. It was still living firmly on the younger side of the shift. Biologists call this an ontogenetic dietary shift. Ontogeny simply means the way an organism changes as it grows. Many living predators do this. Young crocodilians begin with insects and other small animals before graduating to larger vertebrates. A predator's menu expands as its mouth, strength, experience, and energy requirements change. For tyrannosaurs, however, the shift may have reshaped entire ecosystems. Late Cretaceous environments, dominated by giant tyrannosaurids, often seem to have fewer separate species of medium-sized large predators than some earlier dinosaur communities. One proposed explanation is that young tyrannosaurs occupied those middle positions themselves. A juvenile Gorgosaurus could pursue prey far smaller than the animals eaten by a multi-tonne adult. A subadult could tackle something larger. The fully grown animal operated near the top of the food web. Instead of one species holding one fixed ecological role, the same species may have passed through several predator roles during its lifetime. This would also reduce direct competition between generations. Juveniles eating small theropods would not always be fighting adults for access to giant hadrosaur carcasses. Adults and youngsters could live in the same broad landscape while concentrating on different sections of its prey community. We should not stretch one extraordinary fossil too far. It does not prove that every juvenile Gorgosaurus preferred Citipes, that every tyrannosaur species followed exactly the same menu, or that youngsters never fed from large carcasses. Opportunistic carnivores rarely obey strict dietary categories. A juvenile could scavenge from an adult's kill, while an adult might consume small prey when the opportunity appeared. What the specimen does provide is a rare point of direct evidence. The different skull shapes of young and adult tyrannosaurs had already suggested different feeding abilities. Growth studies had identified major changes in body proportions and bite performance. Predator communities appeared to contain a suspicious gap at medium sizes. Then, this Gorgosaurus supplied the missing piece from inside its own body. The narrow-headed juvenile was eating small, lightly built dinosaurs. It removed their flesh-rich legs, swallowed the bones, digested one meal, and then consumed another. That does not establish every detail of its hunting behavior, but it strongly supports the broader reconstruction built from anatomy and ecology. The classic tyrannosaur image is an enormous adult standing over a shattered herbivore skeleton. This fossil reveals the animal before that image was possible. It was lighter, faster looking, unable to handle the same forces, and focused on prey that an adult might barely notice. So the remarkable part of these last meals is not simply that they survived for 75 million years. It is that they preserve a transition. Inside one juvenile rib cage, 4 tiny legs record the early career of an apex predator. Gorgosaurus did not begin life as a miniature version of its adult self. It grew through a series of ecological identities. First, a hunter or scavenger of small animals, then an increasingly powerful predator, and finally a multi-tonne tyrannosaur, capable of feeding on the largest herbivores around it. The bones in its stomach turn that transformation from a biomechanical prediction into something we can almost watch. A young tyrannosaur ate differently because it was a different kind of animal. Growing up did not merely make Gorgosaurus bigger, it changed where the dinosaur stood in the food web.